Welcome back to The Ripple Effect. Today, my co host Nicholas Rohleder and I are unpacking what's making headlines, or maybe dominating headlines. It's the tariff wars. And if you're paying attention to the media, you're probably getting whiplash, just like the rest of us, as news changes almost hour by hour. There's a lot to unpack here, including its impact on consumer confidence. Nicholas, over to you.
Of interesting 'cause as over the last few days, we've had substantial volatility with the announcements, and also, I mean, yesterday we went from in response to the Ontario electricity tariffs, we went up to 50%, the aluminum steel tariffs in Canada, and then we went back down to 25%, and I guess now we're at 25%. So this is all changing pretty rapidly. But I think that the thread that we've seen in just and obviously the market is also having some troubles in the back end of this too. And so, one of the things you really have to look at here is like, what is the big picture, and like where does it start to impact? Because I think that there's a lot of noise, in the iteration of Trump around what's this going to do to the economy, what's going to happen here, and ultimately things landed the back at a level of normalcy. And I think what we're seeing here in the early days, that it'll be interesting to see where it goes. And what I'm watching in particular is what's happening to consumer confidence. And I think, if you unpack that a bit further, you look at the U.S. The U.S. economy is driven 70% by consumer spending. Most people forget that is, we are a service ecosystem, we are a spender ecosystem, and similarly, Canada is roughly 58%, so not too far behind. And the G20 average is in that 55 to 60% area in and of itself, with countries such as China being more around 40%. So obviously we know, tariffs hurt China, right? Like tariffs hurt countries that are export dependent. We kind of understand that situation, right? What I think a lot of people don't understand is that tariffs pass on costs to consumers, and when consumers become cautious and consumer sentiment pulls back, the economic impacts there can be rather severe, because that really is what the G20 economies and the U.S. As an outlier, higher percentages there are really built on. And so it seems like that is starting to erode a bit, and U.S. consumers from the grocery store, to the car dealership lot, are becoming more conscious. And I'd be curious from your perspective too, just to think about. I mean, the U.S. historically, it's the one country you can live in. You can not follow the news and you'll probably be okay, right? Like whereas that other countries don't have that luxury. And I think, like, when I speak to people in Canada, they're acutely aware of this issue and what it's doing to the economy, because it's going to show up immediately. And I presume that's like a dinner table conversation there.
Oh, I think, yeah, I mean, I think you're feeling it in where you have, two neighbors who have historically been very good friends. Everything from a sports game to, people booing during the American anthem, which is not only impolite, but these again are our neighbors. And, this, directionally coming from the top, not from, people at a football game or hockey game. So it's, I think what it's, done to Canadians is it's eroded consumer confidence, but you also have people now wondering about their job security and what it's going to be like, and fingerprinting if you're coming into the States as a snowbird. And the ripple effect stems well past the overarching tariffs and those discussions between countries, right down into the consumer level at a pace I certainly haven't seen before, and can't imagine what it's like trying to watch the news and distill down what's really going on and how it's going to impact your household.
You just just think about we're talking 10%, 25%. Like, these are not insignificant. Ultimately, this cost is a tax on consumers, right? Like at the end of the day, kind of call it what it is. And I think that, if you really look at what's happening in response to this, what we are seeing is that several. I mean, you saw the Taiwan semiconductor news, and there's a series of other ones. Like, there are very large foreign direct investments coming into the U.S. In the wake of this. But the challenge there is that, the U.S. I mean, every 4 years there's a new leader, right? And so it's not something where, like, building $100 billion factory or doing $100 billion investment, this is going to take, like, those benefits are not going to be fully seen until 2028, 2029, 2030. And so this interim period where you kind of have a transition economy where prices are elevated, trading relationships are uncertain. Like, we're kind of entering a territory where we're going back to the future, where the idea is, the U.S. is going to produce stuff again and get back to where it was in the 50s and 60s, whereas the economy is really set up as a service economy, dependent upon consumer spending, as we were kind of talking about. And I think Canada. I mean, the entire G20 developed countries probably are reliant on consumer spending, and I think that it's these little things that consumers realize. I remember one of my favorite teachers I had the university was like, look, like if you're going to buy stocks, you should go when you go in the store, you should buy the stock of all the things that you buy. And I thought it was pretty interesting. I was like, oh, it makes a lot of sense. But like, like consumer preference and how that drives into like investing decisions, saving decisions. One of the things that's been really great for the American economy is like Americans are really safe, relative to other the like kind developed countries, and that may start to change on the back end of this, especially if the market continues to be volatile. And I think that on the Canadian side, he's also the announced other measures of possibly 51st state, all these things that now have been rebuked by Mark Carney in his new position. But he's also now there's retaliatory tariffs coming from the EU. I mean, this is a really challenging situation here. But I think that the core thread as to where this breaks down and becomes like an existential economic problem is that if consumer spending pulls back for a prolonged period of time, we will have a recession. And I think that there are more constructive ways to rebalance trade relationships than I think what is being done right now. And I think because I presume in Canada more broadly, like that there are people who are just upset about this. It's and I don't know. I mean,
A little bit personally, maybe.
yeah,
And of course that, that we shouldn't, but yeah, when you have, neighbors and a history of strong relations, it's hard not to, nationally be upset, because they're our biggest trading partner. And I think it forces that look at, okay, where else could we explore trading relationships? And what it may do is trigger more emphasis around Canada exploring its natural resources, revisiting Arctic security and Arctic opportunities, and maybe standing on its own two feet in a way that it perhaps hasn't done before, all at a time when we have a federal election in front of us at some point, and so much uncertainty. So I think for Canadians, you're just feeling that ripple effect of uncertainty with, both, jobs and consumer confidence.
and I think that it's unfortunate because in this particular moment in time, there's so much opportunity for collaboration between the U.S. and Canada, especially from a
Yeah.
natural resource and a security perspective. I know we've kind of covered this before, but I think that similarly, I mean, if you look at the divergence in the fortunes of the Canadian economy, the versus the American economy, a lot of that is around um, the Canadian economy, the being so tethered to natural resources. And I think that it's interesting that the 2010s were not the best time to be tethered to natural resources, especially the back half of the decade. But now going through a focus on nearshoring, a focus on really like a secure value chain across some of the critical raw materials that touch our day-to-day lives. And I think that are broadly bipartisan. Like I think if you went into the US and went down the aisle, I think that you have the only area of consensus is that there needs to be, I mean, most people can get behind the idea of a shared security vision.
Yeah.
One of the few things people can agree on, but I think that this administration has a really interesting opportunity to really grab onto that and use that as a point of common ground. And I think that the challenge
Yes.
there is that like structuring some of the bilateral resource deals, like the situation in Ukraine, right, of doing that is far different than like Canada, where it's already an intertwined economy. People try. I mean, there's millions of people who travel back and forth between the U.S. and Canada every day. Whereas, like there's not a lot of people traveling from the U.S. to Ukraine. Not to make not to say that's like a
Yeah.
this may change, right? But like it's backdoor neighbor, shared about same value system, and I think the challenge that you have there is that if this situation continues, there's going to be, not just consumer preferences, but investment preferences to steer clear of volatility. I mean, stability generally creates an environment for consumer spending, investment, the whole nine yards. And like when you start to erode that, I mean, you look at what's going on right now. Sarah Week, which is the biggest annual energy conference in Houston. You look at the news coming out on that. I mean, every single manager is like, look, like, we're not getting political, but we need stability to make investments, and people need stability to make spending decisions, like right now, like, I mean, obviously we're a different situation than others, but like, I mean, like, I like right now, if I was, 22 and I was just out of school, I mean, like, I'm not buying a house, I'm not making any major purchases, I'm like, I'm sitting on my hands, and I feel like there's a lot of people that
Maybe a
feel that
Tesla.
way.
Maybe
Oh,
a
yeah.
maybe.
Well,
Um, no, I agree with that. Like it just I think people are, hit pause, and partly because, the story shifts frequently throughout the day. It's like 50%, no, back to 25%, and the retaliation between countries and the threats. It's hard to have any confidence at the moment. And I guess, the big picture looking forward to, like, what's the end game? Like, what does this look like? How does this resolve? How quickly does it resolve? And who are the winners and losers globally?
well, we can. I think that, in tying this off. I mean, the biggest issue that I think people forget here is that, like, if we're going to go through an economic transition where there's pain on consumers, the political will to take that pain has to be in place for a long period of time. Because you look at, it takes 2 quarters to confirm a recession, and so if that continues for a prolonged period of time, like the recessionary impacts of that and the flow through of that into the global economy. So right now you have U.S. stocks selling off, U.S. dollar selling off, euro stronger, Europe doing pretty well, gold doing pretty well. But the issue there is that if you look at, the European stocks that are rallying, many of these, it's different than the U.S. So you have a big home market, same language. In Europe, I mean, most of these companies are relying on North America to a significant degree for their revenues, and so if consumers stop spending, that has a direct negative earnings, the impact there, and like the world's too intertwined, right? And so, like, if we're going to go through this period, that the consumer spending situation is so critical because it's directly tied into the political will to accept higher prices, some of these circumstances that come along with this. And I think that, more honestly, more to be covered. I mean, right now there's still, we're seeing the early aughts of this, but I think that anyone interested in this is the number one thing that they should watch and really pay attention to when they go into the store. Look at things that I mean, I have a bad tendency to, like, put my headphones in, go in, and like get what I need and get the hell out of the store. But like, it's like, really pay attention to I mean, I drink a ton of coffee, right? Like, I probably should do less, but but I look at, there's $1 increase and like the coffee I purchased in the store, which on a percentage basis is like a 15-16% increase, right? And it's like, okay, like that's not insignificant, right? But like, you don't think about it's $1, right? Like, what's $1 here, $1 there? And I think these are the things that are start to add up, right? Where people will start to make different decisions and be a bit more conscious around, wow, this has gone up. Like, you see all these news on eggs, for example. I mean,
Yes,
this at some point in time, people will reconsider how they're doing things. And I think we're in the early days of, this really coming to fruition.
absolutely. And look, I know this, Nicholas, if we pick this up again this afternoon or tomorrow or Friday, this story would continue to evolve. It's moving quickly, and definitely tariffs are got to be on everybody's watch list of important shaping news for all of us.
We'll see what next week brings us.
We will see. Thanks, Nicholas.
Thank you.